Welcome everyone. In this video, we're gonna dive into a special topic which was requested from one of my patrons. We're gonna dive into macros. Here I'm going to explain everything you need to know about the macros and also how to create your payloads in order for them to be evasive. We're gonna explain the main enemies we have to deal with when it comes to macros and pretty much everything from zero to hero. Now, before doing that, I want to walk you through my environment so you can get a nice idea on what we're gonna do and how we're gonna proceed. The thing you see here on my screen is the command VM. On this VM, we are going to develop the payloads, test the payloads, and verify that all work. Beside the command VM, I also have a Kali Linux machine. On this machine, we are going to set up some C2 infrastructure so we can finally test the macros with their final payload. Then on another machine on different network, I have a remote Windows 10 client which has enforced AV protections in terms of Windows Defender, and here we are going to perform our testing. Now let's begin with that. So the first thing is not to actually create the payload, but explain what are the macros. Macros, if you don't know so far, are code, a VBA code, that can be executed inside Word document. So I can effectively create a new Word document. I can type anything I want, does not really matter. I can click on Save, Browse, and here you can see a bunch of templates and a bunch of file extensions. Now that's important. Not all extensions are capable of executing macros or VBA code. However, the .m is of course, as seen in the title, Word macro-enabled template. This is capable of executing macros. However, the .doc extension is also capable of doing that. So it's more OPSEC safe to choose that option because doc looks more native and .m is looking more suspicious. Now, after I create my document, I'm going to go to my desktop and call it, let's see, test.doc. So just like that. Then here we can go to view, we can go to macros and then view macros. Now here we have our macro template, and before creating our first code snippet, it's extremely important to click this macros in and then the exact document we have created. In that case, it is test.doc. So I'm going to click here, I'm going to create or actually give it a name so we can do something like test. And this is our macros pane. Now you may wonder, okay, Osek, but why do we have to code in VBA? And what is the main deal behind it? The main deal is that we can execute code when someone opens Word. The reason for that is that we have specific macros, such as auto-open, which will be executed as soon as the document itself is opened. And you may wonder, okay, but why do I need VBA? Can I write it in some other language? I can say that first, the whole macros are designed to be VBA code. And second, you don't need to specifically learn VBA. Because if you Google offensive VBA, you're going to end up into the security sheets repository, which is again about offensive VBA. And here you have a lot of code snippets that can help you do the job. Usually, from an evasive point of view, we want our macro to not do the heavy lifting for us, but however be used as a staging part. So most of the times, VBA macros, in my opinion, is best to be used as stagers and not as the actual payloads. What I mean by that? So let me go to draw.io and explain something super nice. Now, when we're dealing about macros, we have two main enemies that we have to face. The first enemy is mark of the web or MOTW. Now that's huge and we're gonna of course talk about that also. But the other enemy we have is called endpoint protection or that's AV/EDR. This is the protection mechanisms on endpoint systems that scan files and prevents malicious activities, right? Now, let's look at this thing, for example. If our code and our final payload is in VBA format, that's super heavy and super suspicious because usually if we want to be evasive, we need to do stuff, interact with Windows APIs, even syscalls, in order to get past DDR. And if a VBA code is trying to do that, it's automatically suspicious for DDR because, Word is not supposed to do that. So that's why my OPSEC idea is to always use VBA just for a staging part. So you're going to use your VBA payload to somehow trigger the next steps into downloading and executing a different state, a multi-stage process, which is going to end up executing your payload. So that's the main reason behind it. And here, what we're going to use, for example, is shellcode execution. So just for testing purposes, you can see this is the auto open macro. So I can just copy it, go to Word. I can paste it right here. Just to test it, I'm gonna click run. And if everything's all right, as you can see, I can see the calculator. That's nice. However, we need to speak about something else. And we know that we're gonna build the payload in time, but now we have to talk about the first part, which is the mark of the web. Now, to take this into a practical example, I'm going to go to my command VM, get the macro, and save it. Once I save it, as mentioned before, this is the auto open macro. It's going to automatically start as soon as the Word document starts itself. So to test it, I can close the Word, I can close the macro pane, and I can simply rerun the test.doc file. So double click like that, and you can see security warning macros have been disabled. Now, that's something that you cannot get past. We cannot create a document to both execute the macro and don't have this window. So when you do your pretexting and your phishing, you have to make sure that to instruct the victim to actually go there and click enable content. Now, in that case, I'm gonna self-phish myself. Of course, that is for educational purposes. Click enable content, and as soon as I do that, the calculator is present. Now we're gonna pause for a second from the AVs and EDRs, but we're gonna talk about the mark of the web. Now, we have a standard document which is capable of executing commands. However, we have one main problem with that, and it is the mark of the web. Mark of the web is essentially a flag which tells if a file comes from a remote instance or the external web. If that happens, it is extremely more suspicious, ultimately, and automatically is taking a close eye on it. However, when it comes to macros, if you have a mark of the web, the remote system will never execute your macro, no matter how evasive it is. So as soon as you have mark of the web, your word macro is never gonna work unless we bypass it. And how we bypass it? With something called encapsulation. Encapsulation is a principle of actually encapsulating data, in that case payload, into different files, stacking them inside each other, like the Matryoshka. Now the point here is that, however, if I open this one there with properties, we can see that now it has a security tag, and it says this file came from another computer and might be blocked to help protect this computer. Now that's what mark of the web means. Then I can do right click and properties again, and here we see no mark of the web whatsoever. Now let's test it. If I run it again, I can see just the enable content. I can click on enable content, and boom, calculator is there just like that. And download it. So I'm going to go with my desktop and then move downwards a pole to here. And now we're gonna use shallow burn. So Python 3, shallow burn. We want the input file to be apple.bin. Yep, there it is. It's on the starter folder. That can be even better, because this way we dechain the execution from the download phase, which is extremely invasive when it comes to EDRs. In this way, when you download something, it automatically stores them into the auto start folder. So what that means is that if we reboot the machine, this thing will be executed. And as you can see, it works nice. It counts the Fibonacci number, it first slept for 10 amounts of seconds. And now, if everything is all right, we see the inc.bin, and then we have, in theory, the beacon. Yep, there it is, brand new and functioning beacon. Now let's chain the things together. So I can go back to my command room. I'm gonna close that because I don't need it anymore, and now we know it works.